Pay close attention to what you are about to hear, because hidden inside this story are two details that investigators missed for nearly 3 decades. Details that were sitting in plain sight the entire time. Details that, had anyone looked closely enough, might have brought a little girl home years earlier. It is the summer of 1995. A mother and her 6-year-old daughter are at a baseball game in Alma, Arkansas. The night is warm. The fireflies are beginning to blink across the parking lot. And somewhere in that parking lot, parked quietly among the family minivans and pickup trucks of ordinary Arkansas parents, sits a 1986 red Chevrolet pickup truck with a white camper shell. Nobody pays it much attention. Why would they? It looks like any other truck on any other summer night, but that truck does not belong to anyone at the game. And when the night is over, two things will be gone: the truck and the little girl. Her name is Morgan Nick. She is 6 years old. She loves fireflies. And for 29 years, the man who took her will remain hidden in plain sight, right alongside the truth. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about a case that took 30 years, one extraordinary mother, and a red pickup truck to crack. And about the cruelest twist of all, the man responsible died in prison for a different crime, never once charged for what he did to Morgan Nick. Stay with me, because the detail that finally broke this open in 2024 is something no one saw coming, and the investigation is still going right now. By 10:50 in the evening, Colleen Nick was already at the car. The Little League game had just ended. Families were gathering their things, folding lawn chairs, calling children back from the dark edges of the park. It was the kind of summer night that feels safe, warm, known. Morgan had gone to catch fireflies with her friends. She'd asked if she could. Her mother had hesitated, then said yes. When Colleen reached the parking lot, Morgan's friends were there. Morgan wasn't. She called Morgan's name. Once, twice. Nothing. She asked the other children where Morgan was. They said she'd been right there, by the car, emptying sand from her shoes. She was just there. She was just right there. Colleen Nick would later say that the moment she realized something was wrong, her heart started beating very fast. Not because she knew what had happened, because she didn't, and the not knowing was its own kind of terror. Police were called at 10:55 p.m. In the first sweep of the parking lot, officers found something. Shoe prints in the dirt, small ones, a child's. They led to the edge of the lot, and then they stopped. That was June 9th, 1995. Morgan Chauntel Nick was 6 years old. She has never been found. But 30 years later, because of technology that didn't exist in 1995, because of a mother who never stopped, and because of a red pickup truck that held a secret for nearly 3 decades, investigators finally have a name. The story of what happened to Morgan Nick is not just a missing child case. It is a story about time, about what grief does to a person over 30 years, about a community that refused to forget, about a mother who turned her worst nightmare into a shield for other families. And it is a story about a little girl who stopped to empty sand from her shoes, just for a moment, just for 5 minutes, and was gone. Morgan Nick was born on September 12th, 1988. She was 6 years old when she disappeared, which means she would be 36 today. Old enough to have her own children, and old enough to have lived a whole life. Instead, what we know of Morgan fits inside a few photographs and the memories of people who loved her. And from those fragments, she is vivid. She was a Girl Scout, not in the way children are Girl Scouts because their parents signed them up. She was genuinely proud of it. The badge sash, the meetings, the sense of belonging to something with purpose. She loved cats with the particular intensity that some children reserve for animals, the kind of love that is total and unself-conscious. She had a way of talking about her cats that her family still remembers. She was a big sister. Her younger siblings, Logan and Taryn, were small enough that Morgan had already begun to take the role seriously. There is something in that. A 6-year-old standing a little taller because there are people smaller than her who need her to. She had golden blonde hair and blue eyes and, by all accounts, a smile that people noticed. Not because it was unusual for a child to smile, but because hers seemed to come from somewhere specific inside her. An ease, a lightness. She was 4 feet tall. She weighed 55 pounds. She was afraid of very little. On the evening of June 9th, 1995, Morgan had been invited to a Little League game by close family friends. She hadn't been dragged along reluctantly. She had wanted to come. Summer nights, the smell of cut grass and hot dogs, the particular joy of being somewhere you like with people you love. When the fireflies began to appear in the outfield grass, Morgan and her friends asked if they could go catch them. This is a very specific kind of childhood moment. Fireflies in Arkansas in June are thick and golden, and chasing them is one of those things children do with their whole bodies, arms out, laughing, barefoot. Colleen Nick hesitated. Then she said yes. It was the right thing to do. It was a summer night. Morgan was with friends. The parking lot was lit. Other families were nearby. Nobody did anything wrong. That is perhaps the most important thing to hold on to. Nobody did anything wrong. At some point during the evening, Morgan's shoes filled with sand, a normal hazard of playing near a ball field. Her friends had wandered a few dozen feet ahead. Morgan stopped alone for just a moment and bent down to empty her shoes. That is the last confirmed image of her. A small girl, crouching by a car, shaking sand from her shoes in the warm dark. If you're new here, this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. Real cases, real people, treated with the care they deserve. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. It means more than you know. Now, let's keep going. Alma, Arkansas sits in the far western corner of the state, where the land begins to lift toward the Ozark Mountains. The town has a few thousand residents. It is the kind of place where people know each other, where the Little League games draw families from across the community, where the same faces show up at church and at the grocery store and at the edge of a parking lot on a summer night. In 1995, Alma was the kind of small American town that felt insulated from the things that happened in larger cities. Not naive. People understood danger existed in the world, but there was a quality to life there that felt protected, familiar, manageable. The ball field at Wofford Park was part of that. Little League games in summer were a ritual, not just an event. Families spread out on bleachers and lawn chairs. Children ran between the stands and the edge of the field. The lights buzzed overhead and the air smelled like summer, and for a few hours every week, nothing else required your attention. Morgan's family had traveled from their home in nearby Ozark for the game, a short drive through the kind of Arkansas countryside that is green and close in summer, the trees full and dark, the roads winding between ridges. Coming to Alma for a game was an ordinary thing to do on an ordinary night. By 10:30 that evening, the game was winding down. Families were beginning to gather their things. The parking lot was active, people loading coolers and lawn chairs into truck beds, calling to children. The lights were still on. There were people everywhere. And yet, several witnesses later told police they had seen a red Ford pickup truck with a white camper shell parked near the lot. The camper didn't quite fit. It was 4 or 5 inches too short for the truck bed. The paint was dulled from age. One witness said it looked out of place. Several witnesses also reported seeing a man near the playground and the parking lot. He was white, approximately 6 feet tall, with a medium to solid build and a short beard and mustache. He appeared to be watching the children. No one stopped him. No one had reason to. People stand and watch at Little League games. It is what people do. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the red truck was gone. 10:30 p.m. The game ends. Morgan and her friends ask permission to catch fireflies. Colleen Nick hesitates. She says yes. 10:45 p.m. Morgan is seen by her friends at the edge of the parking lot, crouching next to her mother's car, shaking sand from her shoes. Her friends are a few dozen feet away doing the same. One of them glances back. There is a man near Morgan. He appears to be talking to her. The friends don't think much of it. Adults talk to children all the time. 10:50 p.m. The game is fully over. Families are clearing out. Colleen Nick makes her way from the stands to the parking lot. She expects to find Morgan. Morgan's friends are there. Morgan is not. "Where is she?" Colleen asks. "She was right there." one of the children says. Either by the car. Colleen calls Morgan's name. She walks the perimeter of the lot. She asks other families if they've seen her daughter. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a Girl Scout shirt. People begin to look. Engines that had started are turned off. 10:55 p.m. Someone calls police. In the minutes that follow, the mood in the parking lot changes. The orderly end-of-game dispersal becomes something else. People who had been leaving turn around. A circle forms. The instinctive gathering of a community around something wrong. Officers arrive and begin taking statements. The children describe the man they saw. They describe the truck. Red, with a white camper that didn't quite fit. Arkansas plates, short wheelbase. One witness had seen the truck leaving the lot around the time Morgan disappeared, but they had not thought to note the license plate number. Why would they? It was a parking lot at a Little League game. Police conduct an immediate search of the area. Flashlights sweep the tree line, the adjoining fields, the spaces behind the concession stand. Officers call Morgan's name into the dark. No answer. The shoe prints lead to the edge of the lot, and there they end, which means Morgan didn't walk away. Someone drove. Colleen Nick stood in that parking lot and understood, in the way parents understand things they cannot yet say out loud, that her daughter was not nearby, that this was not a child wandering off, that something had happened in those 5 minutes she had turned away. She would not sleep that night. She would not sleep for a very long time. By dawn of June 10, 1995, the search for Morgan Nick had already begun to grow beyond anything Alma had seen. Local police were joined by the Arkansas State Police and the FBI within hours. Search teams organized into grids and moved through the fields and woods surrounding Wofford Park. Hundreds of volunteers showed up, people who had never met Morgan Nick or her family, who had simply heard the news and come. It was hot. It was Arkansas in June, which means the heat is not merely warm, but physical. It presses against you. Searchers moved through brush and across dry creek beds in temperatures that climbed into the 90s. They found nothing. A tip line was established. Within days, it was receiving dozens of calls. People reported seeing a red truck, a man matching the description, a child who might have been Morgan. Investigators followed everyone. Morgan's face appeared on television, then on flyers, then eventually on milk cartons. That singular symbol of the missing child era of the 1980s and 90s. The composite sketch of the suspect, that square jaw, that short beard, became one of the most distributed images in Arkansas history. But here's what no one talks about. In August 1995, a man tried to take another child. 10 minutes from Alma, same red truck, and investigators found him. In Van Buren, a town just 10 minutes from Alma, an 11-year-old girl was approached in a parking lot by a man driving a red pickup truck. The man tried to get her into the vehicle. She ran. She was safe. Police traced the truck. It belonged to a Van Buren man named Billy Jack Lincks. He was 57 years old. He drove a red pickup. Investigators questioned Lincks on August 31st in 1995. He denied any involvement in Morgan's disappearance. He appeared truthful to the officers interviewing him. Without evidence connecting him directly to Morgan, police moved on. Lincks was arrested and convicted for the Van Buren incident. Sexual solicitation of a child. He went to prison, and the Alma Police Department continued working the other 10,000 leads in a case that kept generating them. Over the next several years, the search took on new dimensions. In 2002, police dug up a plot of land in Boonville, Arkansas, after receiving a tip so specific they felt they had to act. They found nothing. In 2010, federal investigators searched a vacant house in Spiro, Oklahoma. In 2017, they returned when cadaver dogs alerted them to a well on the property. The well held nothing. Each time, investigators were hoping for closure, even the terrible kind. Each time they came home empty-handed, and each time Colleen Nick kept going. Until someone can tell me that Morgan did not survive, she said in 2021, I'm going to fight every day for her to come home. In July 2019, something quiet happened inside the Alma Police Department. A retired captain named Brett Hartley went back to the beginning. He pulled out the original case files. He read through every lead, every interview, every note. He was looking for something that might have been overlooked, not because anyone had been negligent, but because cases sometimes reveal themselves differently across time, with fresh eyes. He found the name Billy Jack Lincks again. Investigators went looking for the truck. What investigators found next changed everything, because that truck had been sold, then sold again. It had passed through multiple owners over nearly 25 years, and yet it still existed. In 2020, investigators located the current owner, explained the situation, and asked if they could examine the vehicle. The owner said yes. Officers from the Alma Police Department and the FBI spent hours going through that truck. They vacuumed the interior, seats, floor mats, the spaces between, and collected canisters of material. Hair, fibers, the compressed residue of time. The evidence was turned over to the FBI. Then in 2023, a detective named Sean Taylor learned about a new method of forensic analysis, one that hadn't existed in 1995. He sent the evidence to Othram Laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas. Othram used a process called kin-SNP rapid relationship testing. They developed a DNA profile from a hair found in the truck and compared it against a reference sample from Colleen Nick, Morgan's mother. On September 27, 2024, the lab report arrived. The hair belonged to Colleen Nick, or one of her siblings, or one of her children. Investigators followed up immediately. They confirmed that none of the Nick family had any known connection to Billy Jack Lincks. None of them had ever been near his truck, which left one explanation. On October 1st, 2024, Alma Police Chief Jeff Pointer stood before cameras in the lobby of the Alma Police Department. A photograph of Morgan Nick, 6 years old, smiling, golden-haired, was displayed behind him. Physical evidence collected from the truck that Lincks owned when Morgan was abducted, he said, strongly indicates that Morgan had been in his truck 29 years. And finally, something real. Let's go through what investigators actually know and what they still don't. Billy Jack Lincks lived in Van Buren, Arkansas, 10 minutes from Alma, for much of his life. In the summer of 1995, he was 57 years old, lived quietly, and owned a red Ford pickup truck with a white camper shell that was slightly too small for the truck bed. Witnesses at Wofford Park described exactly that truck, several of them. He was not, by any available account, a man who stood out. He appeared truthful when first questioned by investigators. Nothing about him, on the surface, demanded a second look. Stay with me, because what happens next is the detail that will follow you out of this video. 2 months after Morgan disappeared, Lincks used that same truck to approach an 11-year-old girl in Van Buren. He was caught, convicted. He went to prison for it. He died there in 2000. He was punished. Just not for Morgan. When the 2024 DNA results arrived, they told investigators this. A hair consistent with Morgan Nick's DNA profile was found inside Links's truck. The FBI had previously found fiber evidence matching Morgan's t-shirt. Combined, the picture becomes clear and harrowing. Morgan was in that truck. What the evidence does not tell us, what happened after, where Lincks went, what he did, where Morgan is now. There is no confession. He denied any involvement until his death. There is no crime scene. There is no witness to what happened after that parking lot. Since October 2024, investigators have been re-interviewing Links's known associates, people from his community, anyone who might fill in the blank years of his life. What they are piecing together is a portrait of a man assembled decades after his death, through the memories of people who either had no idea what he was capable of or who have spent 25 years carrying something they couldn't name. One question drives the investigation now. Was Morgan the first? He tried again 2 months later, using the same method, the same truck, almost no concealment, which suggests either terrifying confidence or that he'd done this before. The Arkansas State Police have said the DNA technology used here is now being applied to other unsolved disappearances in the region. And in a grim way, that is one of this case's most important legacies. The search didn't end with Morgan. There will never be a trial in the case of Morgan Nick. Billy Jack Lincks died in 2000 while incarcerated for the Van Buren offense. Sexual solicitation of a child. He was never charged with Morgan's abduction. He will never be charged with it. In the American legal system, charges cannot be brought against a deceased person. There is no posthumous conviction, no formal finding of guilt. The October 2024 press conference in Alma represented the closest thing to accountability this case will likely ever see. A police chief, a photo of a little girl, and a statement that evidence strongly indicates Morgan was in his truck. That statement is not a verdict. It is a conclusion without a courtroom. And here's the question nobody has a clean answer to. If Billy Jack Lincks served time for what he did in Van Buren, does that count as justice? Or is justice even the right word here? Colleen Nick's answer was measured. He took Morgan, she said. He stole her from her father, from her siblings. But he could not outlast them. He died in prison. Their love for Morgan outlasted his life. It is a complicated kind of closure. Knowing who, without being able to do anything about it. Knowing that the person responsible served time, just not for this, not for her. The case remains officially open. No charges have been filed. No charges can be filed. The legal system offers no mechanism for this, no process by which a family can receive the formal accounting they are owed. Morgan Nick's case has, however, had a profound legal legacy. Arkansas's Amber Alert system is named the Morgan Nick Amber Alert. Legislation shaped in part by advocacy connected to Morgan's disappearance has tightened sentencing guidelines for sex offenders and changed how missing children's photographs are distributed through federal facilities. The law did not catch Billy Jack Lincks for what he did to Morgan, but what happened to Morgan changed the law. In the days after Morgan disappeared, a woman came to see Colleen Nick. This woman had lost her own daughter, an 18-year-old who had gone missing from a neighboring community and been found murdered just 6 months before Morgan was taken. Colleen sought her out, not knowing what she was looking for, just needing to know, how do you survive this? How do you keep being a person when this is your life now? The woman looked her in the eye and said, "You can't give up hope." Colleen Nick has described that moment as the most powerful thing anyone has ever said to her. 4 days in, her daughter still missing, and a stranger who had survived the unsurvivable, telling her that hope was not naive. It was necessary. She built her life around it. What Colleen Nick did next, starting just 1 year after Morgan disappeared, ended up protecting children across the entire country. And most people have no idea. In 1996, Colleen Nick founded the Morgan Nick Foundation, an organization dedicated to educating children and families about personal safety, online safety, and child abduction prevention. The foundation has helped families across Arkansas and beyond, connecting them to resources, to each other, to the peer support that Colleen had desperately needed in those first days. She joined the board of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She trained law enforcement officers across the country, walking into those rooms again and again and telling Morgan's story. Not because it was easy, but because it made other officers better at their jobs, better at responding, better at communicating with families, better at the humanity that gets lost in procedure. She and Patty Wetterling, whose son Jacob was abducted at gunpoint in Minnesota in 1989, and whose case would not be resolved until 2016, created Team Hope, a peer support program for families of missing and exploited children. Two mothers who had lived in the same impossible country, building something so others might not be as alone there. Morgan's siblings, Logan and Taryn, grew up in the shadow and the light of their sister's absence. They grew up knowing who Morgan was, not because they remembered her well enough, but because their mother made sure they would. There are age progression images of Morgan at different ages, 10, 16, 21, 30. She has aged only in photographs. Morgan's father has largely stayed out of the public eye, which is its own kind of testimony to the way this case fractured and reformed the people involved with it. The community of Alma has not forgotten. The Arkansas State Capitol has been lit pink in Morgan's memory. Her name is built into the state's emergency alert system. An entire room inside the Alma Police Department is dedicated to her case. Thousands of files, decades of leads, the physical accumulation of not giving up. When the October 2024 announcement came, When Police Chief Jeff Pointer stood at that podium and said Morgan's DNA had been found in Lincks' truck, Colleen Nick described it as feeling like losing Morgan all over again. And yet, knowing after all this time who took her, having that answered, even if everything else remains open. He stole Morgan from me, she said, from her dad, from Logan and Taryn. But he did not see that he could never win. Our love for Morgan, her memory, her voice, outlasted his life. In June 2025, Morgan Nick would have turned 36. The case is 30 years old. The investigation continues. Investigators are working to understand Lincks more fully, who he associated with, where he went, what he may have done. They are looking for Morgan. Chief Pointer has been clear. This investigation is not over. It is ongoing and active. Colleen Nick, approaching the end of a career spent fighting for missing children, stands at a particular kind of threshold. She knows now who took her daughter. She does not know where her daughter is. I always planned to be able to look Morgan in the eye, she has said, and say, I never gave up fighting for you. There's a detail that stays with you once you learn it. Morgan Nick stopped to empty sand from her shoes. It is such a small, specific, ordinary thing. The kind of thing children do without thinking. You feel it in your shoe. You stop. You tip the shoe. The sand falls out. You put it back on. It takes maybe 30 seconds. Her friends were a few dozen feet ahead. Her mother was at the bleachers. And the parking lot was busy with families. 30 seconds. That's the gap. That's where the story turns. Morgan Nick was a Girl Scout who loved cats. She was a big sister who took the job seriously. She had golden hair and blue eyes and a smile her family still describes the same way. 30 years later, she was afraid of very little. She was 6 years old. She is not a symbol. She is not a lesson. She is not a cautionary tale. She is a person who deserved to grow up. In Arkansas, when children go missing now, an alert goes out. It carries her name. The Morgan Nick Amber Alert. Every time a family learns that the system is looking for their child, her name is part of that. A girl who never came home, becoming the reason someone else's child might. If you know anything about the disappearance of Morgan Chauntel Nick, the Alma Police Department's tip line is open. It has been open for 30 years, and investigators are still answering. The Fireflies were out that night. It was warm. It was summer. She had asked permission to go catch them, and her mother had said yes, and for a little while they were just a child and a June evening and something bright and ordinary moving through the dark. That's who she was. That's who she still is. I want to ask you something before you go. Billy Jack Lincks served time in prison, but for a different crime. He died without ever being charged for what happened to Morgan. I want to know what you think. Does that count as justice? Or is justice even possible in a case like this? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this case moved you, next week I'm covering a case from 1989 that took 27 years to solve, and the answer, when it finally came, broke an entire community in two. Subscribe so you're there when it goes up. Morgan's family is still fighting. The least we can do is keep talking about her.